On this episode of Wilson the VW Bus, I battle it out in round one with a 55-year-old German bus. I'm talking about Wilson and his vintage drum brakes. Welcome back to Wilson the VW Bus. I'm your host, Joe Masberry. And this is the story of Wilson, my 1967 pearl white Type 2 split window tin top homebrew camper VW bus. I've taken a break from the interior work now back in mid-March of 2022 to try to get the bus to stop decently. I know that the old four-wheel drum brakes are not the greatest brakes in the world, but I needed to put all my weight down on the brake pedal about half a block from where I wanted to stop just to get this bus slowed down. It had dangerously inadequate braking. If I needed to make a panic stop, I would be screwed. So I needed once again to jack the bus up. Man, I'm glad I just rebuilt all these new jack points because they are sure getting a workout. I started by taking a look at the front drums, where I learned that the driver's side and passenger side parts are not all interchangeable on a VW bus. For instance, the grease cap on the driver's side has a small square hole in it, and that's where the speedometer cable end protrudes through and is attached with a little tiny C-clip. Mine was gone, but luckily it was easy to find a replacement part in the parts bin. The driver's side also has a reverse threaded spindle nut, which is important so you don't spend all day cranking on the wrench in the wrong direction. When you think about it, it makes complete sense. If the spindle nut was a standard thread, it might loosen up as the bus drove down the road. When I pulled off the front drums, I was both pleasantly surprised and also shocked by what I saw inside. I was surprised at how nice all the components looked. The springs, the wheel cylinders, even the brake shoes almost looked brand new. I have a feeling that I should thank my new friend Mark, owner number 5, for this. However, I was shocked at the amount of mud wasp or mud dauber nest that was built up on the inside of the front brake drums. They were entering through the brake adjustment holes and making little mud apartments inside the drum brakes. This reminds me, I still haven't gotten around to get the rubber plugs for those backing plate holes yet. Once I cleaned out all the debris and brushed out everything with some brake cleaner, and they looked as good as new. I figured all I had to do was maybe bleed the front brakes and adjust them, and we'd probably be good to go. Now, since I had the entire bus up in the air, it wasn't that big a deal to do the back brakes as well. Now, the first thing I noticed was that it wasn't so easy to get the rear tires off because the lowered Type 1 rear has the wheels tucked up in the body pretty high. I actually found it necessary to remove the rear shocks and let the air out of the tires a little so I can get the tires out from underneath the body of the bus. But maybe if I jacked it up higher, it wouldn't have been so difficult. The rear brakes weren't as nice on the inside, and I also noticed that the right rear axle seal was leaking a bit into the drum assembly. So it was time to make a parts order, and I ordered new shoes all around, some rear axle seals, but I'm not exactly sure which type I need. But the parts aren't too expensive, and I ordered a couple different kinds just to make sure I had everything I might need to seal up the axle and to get the brakes working. The parts arrive in a few days, and I install everything and get the axle sealed, and then I realize I don't have a good drum brake adjustment tool any longer. It's been a while since I had to work on drum brakes. So I take out one of my screwdrivers and I put it in the vise, get the torch out to heat it up a little bit till it's cherry red, and give it a little bend. Perfect. Then I use my handheld MightyVac vacuum pump to flush out all the brake fluid in both the front and the rear brakes, and I set the right amount of tension between the brake shoes and the brake drums and bleed all 4 brakes. I also found out that at this time the front wheel studs from a bus are a different length than the rear wheel studs from a Type 1. And obviously you should know that Type 1 is a VW bug and a Type 2 is a bus. It's not that big a deal, but I found it curious that the wheel studs were different. Feeling confident in my brake adjustments, I put the bus back down the ground and go for a test drive. The pedal is okay, but the brakes are still nowhere near as good as they should be. I repeat this process 2 more times, jacking the bus up, bleeding and adjusting, and then I decide something is wrong here. There's a stamping inside the rear drum that says the minimum diameter of 231.5 millimeters. So I measured them, and they're pretty close to the 231.5. So I'm not going to be able to cut these drums, and I'm going to have to get them replaced. The front drums, on the other hand, have plenty of meat left on them, which I'm thankful for because I can't seem to find any replacement drums for a VW bus anywhere. I take those over to Murph, my buddy at the local machine shop, so that he can machine them down and make sure they're nice and round, because I'm figuring they might be a little oblong. A few days later, I got the new rear drums and the turned-down front drums back from Murph. Although the front wheel bearings were in good shape, Murph needed to pull them out to cut the drums, so I decided to replace both the inner and the outer front wheel bearings, races, and seals all at this time. So I installed the bearings and the drums and repeated my adjustment process one more time. They've got to be right now. They are better, but still not great, and I'm starting to wonder if this is as good as VW drum brakes get. My son Zach and I take a few test drives around town, and the brakes feel halfway decent now, but I swear it almost feels like the pedal bleeds down when I'm holding the brakes at a stop sign. I checked, and we've got no brake fluid leaks anywhere. So you know what that means. It's got to be a bad master cylinder. Here's a little fun fact. Guess what year VW bus has a very unique master cylinder for that year only? And it isn't readily available at this time at all. Give up? Well, it's 1967. Awesome. I started searching all my part sources, and no one has got a 1967 VW bus master cylinder anywhere. After a few days, I finally found one available at a local VW restoration shop about 15 minutes from my home called Pegasus. So I ran over and gave him the cash for what I thought was a new German part. Unfortunately, he called me a few days later to let me know that it was actually a Chinese knockoff part and not the German master cylinder I was looking to get. I'm not happy about that, but I needed to get these brakes fixed, and something's better than nothing, right? I also found a nice front disc brake conversion kit online, but it has been on back order forever due to the global pandemic shortages in manufacturing, and the company has no idea when it might be available again. Anyway, I put my name on a wait list for the disc brake conversion kit just for kicks. So at this point, I paid for the new aftermarket master cylinder from the local shop, but I haven't installed it yet. I'm also waiting for another new part, which I'll talk more about in detail in the next episode. For now, the brakes are better than before when I started working on them, but there's still a lot of pumping of the brake pedal just to get the bus stopped. This brake saga will continue in another episode or two. Well, that's it for this episode of Wilson the VW Bus. Make sure to tune in next time when I address one of the complications of a lowered VW bus, and I try to recall some skills that I haven't used since the 8th grade. Man, that's over 40 years ago.